People have been writing essays for centuries, well before computers and word processors. The principles of outlining, draft writing, and rewriting can be implemented with a pencil and a piece of paper. But we do have computers and word processors, and almost every writer today uses them. So let's talk about software tools that can help support our writing workflow. In the previous video, we looked at an ideal writing workflow that would let you start with a mind map of some kind, convert it to an outline, and then write in an environment where changes in your draft text are synchronized to changes in your outline. Also, within this environment, we would like to have easy access to our research materials on the fly as we're writing. I'll just say it up front. There is no single piece of software that does all this inside a single program. The most popular word processors, like Microsoft Word, don't even come close. What we have on the market are software products that do one or two of these jobs well. For writers looking to implement a digital workflow, what they normally do is find 2 or 3 products that are compatible in the sense that the exported output of one can be used as input for the other. So for example, you might end up moving from a mind mapping application to an outlining application or a word processor, and then back and forth between a reference manager and a research materials database application. Jumping from one application to another is not ideal. It disrupts the writing process, and those disruptions are costly. They add up. But the more worrisome part, from my perspective, is that it makes it harder to keep the outline and the draft content synchronized. Once they get out of sync, you've lost one of the key features of the idealized workflow that I described in the last video. I prefer systems that can maintain the synchronization for as long as possible, but you might have other priorities. I don't expect everyone watching this to agree with me about the features that I think are good or bad. It's just good to be aware of what's available and how different applications can support different workflows. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to walk you through a few examples of software products in action that will highlight the workflow principles that we've been discussing. I'm going to focus here on synchronized outlining and draft writing. In a later video, we'll look at a workflow that incorporates research and reference materials. Let's start with mind maps and mind mapping software. Mind maps let you brainstorm and visualize relationships between ideas. That's their main function. Every mind mapping application lets you add branches onto a central node, label the branches, drag and drop to rearrange the branches, hide and show sub-branches, and draw linkage relationships between the nodes. You can use this to create a standard hierarchical tree structure, but it's more flexible than that. One of the common uses of mind maps in business is to document the flow of ideas in a meeting where people are spitballing ideas and making suggestions, and the mind maps that result can be very non-linear. Now from this starting point, software applications can add additional features, like adding graphics to represent nodes, linking documents and multimedia files to nodes, adding text notes to nodes, and so on. Business-oriented mind mapping tools will have additional features for presentations, project management, and collaboration. Most of these business features aren't relevant to essay writing. Minimally, the 2 features you want are the ability to add text notes to a node and the ability to view a mind map as a traditional outline. So a writer might start off a project by brainstorming the organization of the essay in a mind map and use the text notes attached to each node to flesh out the content. If you preview in outline mode, you can get a sense of how your essay is going to look as a document. Now this is the point where most mind mapping applications expect that you'll finish up your writing project in a proper word processor. So if they have these features at all, they'll give you options to export your outline in various formats that can be imported into a word processor. They don't expect you to finish a completed writing project in the mind mapping software. I want to talk about this transition from outline to a dedicated word processor like Word. But first, let's take a look at dedicated outlining applications. Outlining applications have become much more common over the past couple of years. Basic outliners let you generate hierarchically structured lists. You can use them to capture ideas, make to-do lists, brainstorm the structure of a document, and so on. The more feature-rich outliners add project management features and some simple spreadsheet features for doing things like managing budgets. And there's a recent trend toward applications that combine note-taking and outlining features, like you see with applications like Evernote or Microsoft OneNote. But here let's just focus on outlining. The more basic outliners aren't great for long-form writing. Like with the mapping software, they expect you to export the outline into a word processor to finish your writing. Some of the more feature-rich outlining apps do cater more to writers. OmniOutliner, for example, has a nice interface that you could use for long-form writing. This is a good example of an environment that supports what I'm calling synchronized outlining and draft writing mode, where you can jump back and forth and make changes in either mode and the whole thing stays synchronized. What's really nice in this program is the ability to select a particular section of your document and just work on that. And then you can select multiple sections or the whole document to see how the whole thing looks in draft mode. This is a very useful feature. I like it a lot. But I wouldn't try to bring an essay manuscript to completion in an outliner like this. It's not a good environment for handling certain formatting tasks, like managing references and bibliographic entries, that you would want if you're writing an academic essay. So once again, there's an expectation when you use this kind of software that at some point you're going to hand it off to a dedicated word processor. So let's talk about word processors. And let's start with the obvious one, Microsoft Word, which is still the most widely used word processor in the world by a long shot. Does Word have synchronized outlining and draft writing? Yes, it does. Though I think that very few people actually use it on a regular basis. I've asked my students, and most of them have no idea there even is an outlining mode in Word. Almost everyone works exclusively in the print layout view that it defaults to when you open a new document. Here's an essay. It's one of my published essays, in fact, in Microsoft Word for Mac 2011. You can see that it's formatted nicely, and we've got a number of level 1 headings, starting with introduction, and then there are 6 numbered headings in the main body, and then the conclusion. So that's 8 level 1 headings corresponding to 8 important sections that make up the essay. Now, in section 1 of the main body, titled What is Environmental Philosophy, there are 2 subsections, one called Environmental Ethics and one called Radical Environmental Philosophy. These are level 2 headings, and as you can see, they're formatted differently in the document. They're centered and italicized. Now I'm going to switch over to Outline View. And on this view, you can see the level 1 headings. The plus sign indicates that there are child nodes that can be expanded. So let's expand the introduction. Here, each paragraph of body text is its own node, and it's tagged as body text in the outline level menu. I can move these paragraphs around by selecting the paragraph and using the up and down arrows in the toolbar. In this version of Word, I can't drag and drop these paragraphs for some reason, but I can drag to rearrange the headings, which moves everything within the heading too. So for example, I can open up section 1, you can see the body text in that section, and then we have the 2 subsections with all of their content which you can choose to hide or display. Now I can switch the order of these subsections in the outline, and for the sake of illustration, let's change the wording of that second section to Radical Environmental Philosophies. And now you'll see that when we switch back to print view, the content has been reorganized, with Radical Environmental Philosophy coming before Environmental Ethics instead of after, and the text has been updated. So that's an example of synchronized outline and draft mode. Most of the better word processors have a version of this feature, and some of them, like Nissus Writer, implement it much better than Word. I learned to my chagrin that Apple dropped the outlining feature entirely from its Pages word processor when it updated to version 5. And Google Docs doesn't have an outlining feature. So you need to check to see if the word processor you use has it. If it does, I certainly recommend playing around with it to see how it works. There are a couple of features of Word's outline mode that I don't like. At least in my version, you can't customize the spacing of the body text in outline mode, or the spacing between bullet nodes, so it's all sort of crammed together. And you can't hoist a particular node to the top of the editing window and work on it in isolation. Also, there are formatting changes that may not be preserved when you move back and forth between draft mode and outline mode. So Word's outline mode is better than not having an outline mode at all, but it's certainly not my favorite implementation of this feature. The next piece of software I want to show you is called Inspiration, and it's currently on version 9. It's the flagship product of the company Inspiration Software, which produces visual thinking and learning products for the education and business markets. Inspiration runs on both Mac and PC. It's one of the very rare platforms that integrates diagramming, mind mapping, outlining, and draft writing, so it's certainly worth a look. It also has a presentation mode, so you can take your diagram and create a PowerPoint-style slide presentation from right in the app, which actually has some really cool features. If you've never heard of Inspiration, it's because historically, the best market for this kind of product has been education, specifically kindergarten through grade 12 education, and technological support for students with learning differences, like dyslexia. So companies that make these products have focused on those education industries, and not on the general consumer market. Anyone who works at an education support center for students with disabilities is familiar with Inspiration or programs like it. I find it deeply ironic that the kind of writing workflow that I've been advocating in this course, which I think is helpful for any writer, is only taken seriously by companies developing software for children or students with learning disabilities, as though visual learning and organization tools were something that the average high school or college student or adult writer wouldn't have any need for. Or worse, if you do need or benefit from these visual thinking tools, that this means your writing skills are somehow immature or deficient. I could not disagree more. Anyway, let me just show you an example. Here's a sample document on the 6 kingdoms of biology. We've opened it in diagram mode. And in this mode, the program functions very much like a standard diagramming or mind mapping program. All these images either came from the symbol library that comes with the program or were grabbed from the web and dropped onto the page. The nodes are editable and you can add new nodes to any branch. You can also add text nodes to any node. And the ones with a little icon in the top right corner indicate that there's a text node, like this one, attached to the heterotrophic node. You can edit the text using the formatting toolbar at the bottom. Here I'm going to bold the term heterotrophic in the text node. Now, if you click on this icon in the top left, we can see the document in outline mode. Now we have a number of standard outlining tools. We can collapse and expand subnodes using the triangles in the left sidebar. We can hide and display the notes associated with each node. We can rearrange the nodes up and down the hierarchy. The program also keeps track of the ordering of the nodes and can update the labels accordingly. Here we've swapped the order of sections A and B. Unique RNA arrangement used to be below thermophiles. Now it's above thermophiles. But the lettering in the headings didn't change. The software is automatically labeling the nodes and keeping track of their ordering. So you can work in this outline mode. And if you switch back to the diagram, any changes you made will be updated in the diagram. So here we have synchronization between the diagram mode and the outline mode. Now, when it comes to formatting the final version of your document, once again, this application assumes you're going to do that in a separate word processor, like Word. You can customize the layout of your export and set it up so the transfer is automatic, just by clicking the transfer button on top. Here, we won't include the diagram and we'll suppress the indentation, but everything else will carry over. It opens the document in Word in draft mode. And here's what it looks like in print layout mode. The margins are a little narrow, but you can easily change those. Now, for printing purposes, this is fine. You can go ahead and make whatever cosmetic changes you want. As a starter document, this is fine. But a serious downside with the way the transfer is implemented is that you lose the structured outline information in the transfer. If I look at the document in Word's outline mode, you see that it carries over the formatting of the headings, but Word tags all of it as body text, and every node is a level 1 node. So it's no longer functioning as a hierarchical outline in Word. It has no hierarchy, it's a flat document. If you wanted to keep working on the document using synchronized outlining and draft writing, there is a workaround. You need to go through the headings and tag them in Word with the right outline level. That's a pain, but it's easy enough to do. I would love to see this app updated so that it can export to a standard outline format like OPML, and to a Word format that will retain Word's outlining tags. Now, because this product is marketed to educators, it comes with a lot of templates and sample files. Hundreds, in fact. And these are useful in giving an idea of the kind of planning that can be done in an app like this. It's not intended just for essay writing, but there are some good essay examples too, like this one, which is about the pros and cons of the so-called New Deal. For those of you watching who aren't familiar with this period in American history, what we call the New Deal was a series of programs and laws enacted in the United States in the 1930s that were designed to kickstart the American economy and help pull the country out of the Great Depression of the 1920s. In the US, there's been a long-standing debate over the pros and cons of the New Deal that tends to divide liberals and conservatives, so this essay is about that debate. Here's the start of the document in outline view with the text notes displayed. So what am I saying here? Am I asking you to buy a copy of this program? No, I'm not. Although you cannot beat the price, it's only $39 for the desktop app. And there's a web-based version that is only $6 a month to use. No, I'm using this program to illustrate the concepts of synchronized outlining and drafting that I think are part of an ideal writing workflow. I support the ideas behind the program and programs like it. Like I said at the outset, there is no program that implements the workflow that I'm imagining perfectly. But if you're struggling with your writing, the more you start thinking about your writing in terms of a workflow like this, the better off you'll be. So to sum up, in this video I've walked through a few examples of software applications that can support at least part of an idealized writing workflow that makes it easy to move back and forth between outline mode and a draft writing mode. The takeaway is that there is no perfect solution, but there are tools that implement different aspects of this workflow to varying degrees of success. You'll need to decide for yourself how you want to work and how you want the technology to support your work. Now, there are two things that I haven't discussed here. I haven't discussed research materials and how to make these accessible when you're writing. And I haven't talked about the tools that I use in my personal writing workflow. So stick around for the next video because that's what's coming up next.